Good morning, and thank you for joining me. Today, I'm going to talk to you about death with dignity. It's a patient's right to die on their own terms. Imagine you're unable to walk, move, or eat without assistance, day in and day out for the rest of your life. Is that living? No one deserves to die a slow and painful death. For 2 years, I watched my mother slowly and painfully wither away after suffering irreparable brain damage from multiple strokes. She was only able to blink her eyes, release tears, and breathe unassisted. She was essentially trapped in her own body, unable to communicate, and just die without dignity. No one deserves to die a slow and painful death like this. Today, I will be talking to you about death with dignity. It's a patient's legal right to die on their own terms. I will also share with you the states that have legalized assisted death and as well as share some of the historical advocates that have supported the death with dignity or assisted death initiative. I will begin by explaining death with dignity, the legal options available. There's two of them: euthanasia or physician assisted, also known as aided death. They're legal rights for individuals to choose to die on their own terms. Since these options are not available in all states, there are still patients and terminal ill patients that are slowly having their dignity stripped away. They're suffering in pain, they're victims to this illness, and ultimately they're dying. There's no dignity to their death. Euthanasia is a mercy killing. It's a Greek word that has the meaning of good death. And there are two forms of euthanasia: there's passive and there's active. The passive form is removal of a feeding tube or a life support device that is keeping a person alive. By removing the device, the patient essentially passes away and their pain and suffering has ended. Then there's the active form, and it's a lethal dose of medication to assist a patient with pain and bring about death. Another option for terminally ill patients to choose is PAD, which is physician assisted aided death. This option helps end the pain and suffering for the patient legally, and it permits the doctor to assist the qualified patients. Now, PAD is a licensed physician prescribing a life-ending medication that's administered by the patient. This legal process helps both patients, the public, and the physicians. So it defines a criteria or a framework so that the public understands why the physician is taking this action. And the qualified criteria or framework for the Death with Dignity Act is that you must be 18 years or older. The patient must have requested in writing and orally to die with dignity. They must be diagnosed with a chronic illness, and the life expectancy is 6 months or less. The option to die on your own terms is currently limited in states, which I will share with you now. All states allow patients to withhold life-preserving treatments, which is the passive form of euthanasia. And the reason that this is allowed is because in 1990, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled individuals have the right to have a living will, or DNR, which is a do not resuscitate form. This ruling is the passive form of a mercy killing. Then there's the physician assisted or aided death, and it's only legal in 5 states. The 5 states that allow PAD is Washington, Oregon, Vermont, and recently California. However, California will not actually have it legalized until 2016. Now, these states have the framework or the criteria defined with assisted death. However, Montana, which is another state where it was implemented to die with dignity, does not have the same regulatory framework as mentioned before. Now that you have an understanding of death with dignity and the states that have legalized death with dignity, I will conclude with sharing the advocates that have helped make death with dignity a legal choice. The advocates include both the physicians and patients. Some of the physician advocates, we can't forget the controversial activist Dr. Jack Kevorkian, who tried to legalize assisted suicide under the argument that everyone deserves a humane death. In 1990, Dr. Kevorkian helped 130 people die using his machine, the Thanatron, which is also another Greek word for death machine. And then there's Dr. Peter Rasmussen. Now, in 1990 as well, he supported the Oregon Act and was able to get it on the ballot, the Death with Dignity. Dr. Rasmussen was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in 2014, and he died on November 4th, 2015, with the help of the Dignity Act that he helped implement. Then there's patient advocates across America. Who can forget the much publicized Brittany Maynard? Brittany was a 29-year-old who was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and she moved from California to Oregon in order to utilize the Death with Dignity Act. Brittany's story made headline news because she moved from her community, her family, and her friends in order to end her pain and suffering in a peaceful home in Oregon. Then there's Patty Rosen. Now, Patty Rosen was a nurse, and she was a spokeswoman for her daughter, Jody, who was a 25-year-old that was diagnosed with terminally ill bone cancer. Patty had worked in the medical profession for years, and she wanted to honor her daughter's request, so she administered a lethal dose of medication to her daughter. However, in Patty's case, she was unable to share her story for many years because of fear of prosecution. Today, I've informed you about death with dignity. I hope this information is helpful in making decisions about patient right options. And in closing, remember that no one deserves to die a slow and painful death and become a victim to illness. Keep in mind that I've reviewed the legal right options, euthanasia, and the physician-assisted or aided death. The states where death with dignity are legal, I've shared with you the advocates. They're both patients and physicians. And I would also encourage you to reach out because there's numerous educational resources to learn more about the death with dignity and or become an advocate for allowing people the right to die on their own terms. Thank you for listening.